Hi, everyone. This is Rico Figliolini, host of Peachtree Corners Life. Little new place here. I'm at Atlanta Tech Park's podcast room recording this, even though Brian's down the road from me. Thank you, Brian, for being with me. I appreciate you joining me.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
This is good. It's been a while. Plus, there's a couple of really big things that we should be talking about soon. But before we get there, I just want to thank again our sponsors, two great sponsors that we have, EV Remodeling and Vox Populi. You can find out more about both companies in our notes below and in the links that we provide. But just know that EV Remodeling is a great Peachtree Corners based business doing remodeling from bath, kitchen, and whole house remodel to Vox Populi, doing your brand needs, whether it's a vehicle wrap or apparel with the logo and any of that at trade shows, anything that you need your logo and your mark on. Check them out. They're also a Peachtree Corners based business. So, in the meantime, let's get into the show because you all had a big city council meeting Tuesday that ran deep into the night. Well, not deep into the night, but close enough. It was a long meeting, right? It's like 3.5 hours.
It was.
Yeah. So, um, I guess the first thing let's talk about the easy stuff first. Let's talk about the reconfiguring of Technology Parkway. Let's do that one first. God knows it's been a while. I don't know how many years now that we've had that set up for as an autonomous lab, if you will, for vehicles and different sorts of accessories that would be used for autonomous vehicles and other smart city initiatives that need a road to work on. Um, but you're going to be reconfiguring that because life has changed, right, since that was set up?
It has. So, even before Curiosity Labs ecosystem was created, this section of roadway had three lanes, had two travel lanes, and then a very wide, like it was 15 and a half feet
Mhm.
of a suicide lane in the middle. Underutilized,
Right.
for whatever reason, Paul Duke put it in like that. But when Curiosity Labs ecosystem was created, it had enough linear feet from curb to curb for us to put four lanes in. And you're going back almost 7 years
Yeah.
when we created this. At the time, autonomous vehicles per the federal government, um, the Federal Highway Administration, they required autonomous vehicles to have some segregation from the traveling public. And so we configured the roadway so that the two outer lanes were where the cars were going to be doing their testing. And at first, if those people remember, there used to be flexible bollards,
Yes.
that were sticking up out of the road
Oh,
all the way
God,
down.
yeah. Yeah.
Over time,
Yeah.
and in fact, it's actually the Federal Transportation Safety Administration, but they started to back off on how frequent those flexible bollards were. So, they
Mhm.
started to say, all right, autonomous vehicles are evolving. Then they allowed us to remove those and just have the lane separators, the little turtlebacks that
Yeah.
you see now. Well, technology is such that we don't need segregated lanes anymore. And so we're going to reconfigure the roadway such that it will help flush traffic better, meaning we're going to go back to two travel lanes.
Mhm.
And in some sections where we don't need deceleration lanes for people who are going to be making right turns, for them to kind of slow down and get out of the travel lane, we're going to put medians in, planted medians, and then so there'll be a little bit of a meandering, kind of cool thing to it. But getting people who want to turn off of the travel lane will help flush traffic a little bit better, and including, the intersection of Technology Parkway and Innovation Drive, which used to be Technology Parkway South. And so that reconfiguration will start here within the next 30 to 60 days.
Oh, really?
Probably be
Oh,
a 5, 6 month process to do it. I mean, none of the roads will be closed. There may be periods of time where there's a one lane,
right.
but we'll keep that outside of rush hour. But again, it's not a major travel thoroughfare. But
Hmm.
those who work or even use it will probably be glad. But we
Yeah,
will still have autonomous vehicles being doing testing. It's just they'll actually be completely intermingled with the motoring public,
sure.
such as you and I. So that's where
Yeah.
technology. So Curiosity Lab has to continue to evolve, and having the separate lanes not only is unnecessary, but it's not the most ideal road situation for those anybody
For
who's
sure.
been on it. So we're going to be able to get it back to where there's no disruption when these things are being tested. So we're
I mean,
excited about being able to continue to be that ecosystem that companies want to use, but being as efficient as we can with those who use it for their normal business and commuting
sure.
uses.
I mean, that makes sense. I mean, you have Waymo driving all over the place in
Yep.
Atlanta. You have other car companies. In fact, there's one that I saw, I think just last week, I guess, near World Congress Center, and they had fewer cameras on top of it, but they had
That
no
was probably
demarcation.
May Mobility.
Was that May Mobility?
Yeah.
Okay, because there were no demarcations on it to say who they were. Um,
Yeah,
but
that's
they,
probably them. They
okay,
they ended up getting a big contract with the city of Atlanta based on the testing that they did here.
really? Okay,
Yeah, we had them
good for
deployed,
them.
and City of Atlanta came up and looked at it and said, you know
Mhm.
what, we'd like to have, we would like to approve May Mobility's contract. So they're May and Waymo are both a autonomous you know taxi service now
Yeah,
down in Midtown.
yeah. You see them zipping around and stuff. Of course, they have to work out the flooding issue, but otherwise they're zipping around.
Yep.
Um, there was something else that you all discussed Tuesday night also, and it was essentially a rezoning from Sun Court that came up at the beginning of the meeting. I watched part of it streamed online, so I didn't wasn't able to stay around for the whole of it. But the original rezoning that was done 4 years ago is being asked to be changed a bit in that meeting, where they were actually adding 68 additional units. Part of it is because they got an additional acre of land, apparently. Um, but they were requesting additional 68 more apartments to be added, multifamily. I think they were adding 21 townhomes to that home equity. Um, Green space is there, and well, green space, a trail system that will run through the development. Um, so there were a lot of questions from city council people, really good questions that I thought that came out of all of them pretty much, because there was a lot going on in that discussion in just a short amount of time I was listening to it. I mean, stuff like, um, multi-use is supposed to have a certain amount of set retail space that apparently was, in some cases, were being used not in that development because it's not up yet, but in other developments as amenities for the apartment dwellers versus retail, which is totally against, I don't, the spirit of the regulation, the coding, probably maybe even illegal in that regard. I bet I could go there and say that because they're not following what they were supposed to follow, the conditions. But because of stuff like that, there was more questions about this development and what would happen. Um, so can you fill us in a little bit, Brian? And of course, I'll have some questions as we go. But
Yeah, so about 4 years ago, this is a property that surrounds the office building located at Tucson Court, which is really across the street from Intuitive, right next to the post office.
yes. Mhm.
And it is an office building that has a large underutilized surface parking lot that goes back to where we are parking, our parking requirements were a lot, you know, um,
Yeah.
a lot more, inclined to have more parking spaces per person in there. Anyway, they
Yeah.
have underutilized parking. So 4 years ago, they came to the city, and that was the actual rezoning. And one of the conditions was they would have a not to exceed number of 270 multifamily units. Then fast forward to today. In the meantime, they got their what's called entitlements to do certain things, And through the process of everything from, you know, trying to lock in a formalized agreement with Intuitive Surgical to have some of these units to be specifically executive housing for Intuitive, which they were hoping to have and weren't able to get, down to even interest rates 4 years ago were climbing and, construction costs. Bottom line is the numbers that worked when they got the entitlement from city council stopped working. So, recently the owner of the office building ended up giving even more land up. It came with an arrangement to the developer to say, we really want you to do it because we want to have this as a mini campus in and of itself. The intent is really to support the existing office building to make sure that it's healthy and that, there's that walkable amenity thing between where you work, where you live, maybe in some minor cases where you might buy something or shop. So they got a little bit more acreage and redid the site plan and then came back to the city. And this wasn't a rezoning, it was a change of conditions. And they asked for the maximum amount of units to go up from 270, or 170, excuse me, 170 4 years ago to
Mm.
238. So they asked for that, maximum to go up from 170 to 238, so that they could, build this. And part of the mixed use is it is being combined with the office. So the office is one of the mix of uses. So this is being combined together. They also ask for, the conditions to allow for them to put in equity products. So they're putting in 21, equity townhomes as well. And so, as staff went through this in preparation for Planning Commission and City Council to see it, we also made, once they asked for the conditions of the original rezoning to be kind of up for debate, it gives us a chance to have our own bite at the apple. So we made some
Mhm.
changes as well. There's a section of the multi-use trail that we, put on them to construct, which, fits into our master plan. It's a piece, but
Mhm.
it's something at least the city won't have to pay for. Council even ended up putting a requirement that they can't get past the 50% certificate of occupancy threshold on any of the units before the trail is finished. We maintain there's about $300,000 in there for us to put towards what might be a small, uh, ped bridge connecting them across the street to Intuitive,
And that would be 300,000 in escrow from the developer.
from the developer.
Right.
And so, there might be
Is that towards a total? I mean, what would a pedestrian bridge
well, I mean, yeah,
across
it depends on the
Spalding
scope,
Drive?
but if we did a
Right.
simple one,
Yeah.
it may be enough to do the whole thing.
Okay.
If we're just doing a simple one, not, certainly not anything like the one that we wanted to be as a,
Yeah. Yeah.
a marquee one across Peachtree Parkway. Besides,
Right.
Spalding is not as wide as it is anyway.
No. No.
And it's really grade separated. I mean, theoretically, it could be a tunnel. I mean, it's just money put
Mm.
towards grade separated crossings so that if there is a lot of activity across the street between the two,
Mhm.
that we don't have people playing Frogger on
So,
Spalding.
yeah,
Oh, and one
especially
other
going
important
across it.
point too is
Sure.
we authorized the curb cut onto, both Spalding and Tucson Court. So now there will
Okay.
be two ingress egress out of there. So if you
Mm.
were turning left, you could go down to where there's, you know, um, getting farther away from the signal there, right by the post office.
Hmm.
And so anytime you have multiple ways to get to one location, it always helps to
Right.
diffuse the traffic. So that we also required a deceleration lane. So if you're traveling, say, from Dunwoody into Peachtree Corners and you wanted to make a right in there, you get people off of the travel lane as they slow
Right.
down.
Right.
So little things like that. And so it was, it wasn't a rezoning, it was just a change of those conditions. And so that's
Well,
what council.
how many square feet is the office part?
Oh,
Because
that's a great question. I don't
I don't
remember.
completely remember. Is that a
I
reuse
think
of
it's a
office?
four-story office building.
Okay, so is it a reuse of what was there, or is it brand new 4 story?
No, no, no. It's been there
Uh,
for a while. I mean,
okay, that's what I
it's
thought. So,
occupied. I think they were at 90% occupancy right before COVID. I think they're down to 60% is what the owner said.
okay,
But really almost all of this, if
yeah,
not all of it, is actually going on paved surface parking that actually already exists.
right,
So this is basically a big office building
hmm,
that has all this sea of parking around it. And
yeah.
the owner of the building gets with the developer and says, I'll sell off some of this surface parking that I don't need anymore because the requirements have changed.
Hmm.
And I'll sell it off so that you can build something in support of the office building. And that's what this is.
Okay, so this was a multi-use development, I guess.
Yep.
This fell under that. And what
Yes.
they did was to do that, I just want to understand it. To do that, they took the existing office building.
Yep.
It's not new development. It's not going to be revamped or anything. They're taking the existing office building as part of this multi-use, and they were adding in the townhouses and the um, 238 apartments, I guess.
Yep. As
Um,
well as some retail space.
so, and how many square feet did that end
I
up
mean, it's
being?
like
Because
2,000 or just under it. I
okay,
mean, it's not big, and the multi-use trail. So those are all
right.
that's the mix of uses that are all going on the
So,
property.
my pet peeve on some of these things is like what happened. I think it happened at Broadstone, but I'm not sure now. Is that there was supposed to be retail, coffee shop, or whatever restaurant or breakfast place or whatever it is, and they ended up. I don't know if it was them. I forget which development it is, so I don't want to say them per
No, it's
se.
Broadstone.
Is it
It was
Broadstone?
discussed that
Okay,
night. I think
okay,
you're remembering hearing those comments. It was
okay.
Broadstone.
Yeah. So they did not make it a retail coffee place. Let's say they made it a coffee place, hang out for their tenants, which totally is like got to be against the law or got to be so for sure against the
Well,
spirit of what it was supposed to do.
how they get away around that, if you will, is
Yeah.
and Broadstone is an example of this. They just approached us not but like less than a month ago
Mhm.
asking what they needed to open a business. What happened is they had about 2,000, 2,500 square feet.
Right.
Was supposed to go to some retail component.
Mhm.
And once they opened, they started shopping it to for different uses, and they just weren't getting interested parties. So as they weren't
Mhm.
doing it, they just ended up saying, well, we'll just put in this self-serve coffee station in the interim for just our tenants while they shopped the space for an external facing, establishment. Now,
I
I
keep thinking slow
I
walking
do not
things that
disagree.
people
I
slow
do
walk
not know
stuff.
how hard
Yes,
they
yes.
were marketing it. I do know that they, what they're approaching us recently was to say they do have a
Mm,
third party who wants to open up some sort of a coffee bistro or sandwich
mhm,
shop thing in there
mhm.
that would be open to the public. So it would be true retail space.
Which is what
But
it's
it's
supposed to
taken
be.
4 years to get to that point.
Yeah,
They've had it. So yeah,
that,
I'm just
yeah.
saying, I'm just telling you
I
what
know, I know.
developers tell us when we call them out on that very thing, which is,
Yeah.
and some of them just lay vacant. And Councilman Wright in the meeting brought it up, saying, it's not implausible if some of these developers bake in the fact that, look, for us to get the density we want, it's got to be
Mhm.
a mixed use. They come up with a mix of uses,
Right.
some
Right.
of which are higher percentage, but they ended up having that, you have to have a minimum of three. That third one can oftentimes be somewhat of a token,
Mhm.
and that token third use developers could very well be like, you know what, the odds that we're going to fill it with something are small, and we'll just shrug our shoulders and say, oh,
Right.
it's a loss leader for us because it got us the other things. I don't know that that didn't happen. Again, at some point, the city can only go so far on some of these things.
Well, then I think the city
But
needs to it's listen, I understand it's a difficult thing, you know. I understand that. It's retail is difficult, brick and mortar is difficult. I understand that. But but if something's going to be truly multi-use, I think you all have to sort of not you, I'm saying city council and others that are involved in it need to really look at, well, what is that? What does that mean? Is it 20% of the development square footage? Um,
well,
needs to, you
Rico,
know,
remember, we've talked about this and we actually have
yeah.
that now. The difference here is that applies to rezonings. So if a new developer property owner came in right now, we
Hmm.
do have minimum percentages. So to
Yes,
your point,
yes.
we already did kind of fix that. The difference in Tucson Court is it wasn't a rezoning anymore. They already had their entitlement. It was only a change in some of those conditions. So that
Understood.
would have been a rezoning for us to
Hmm.
change that percentage. They did come in prior to us fixing it.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you, I'll give you some credit for you bringing this up to me previously, maybe even Broadstone being the one you used as the example. And then I took that and I was like, that's a good idea. Got with Sean Adams, and we ended up changing, who's our community development director, changing that now on rezonings.
Yeah,
So,
because
you can take some
we
credit in and having raised this red flag in the past. And I
thank
heard
you.
you. I
Thank
heard
you. I did raise it several times, and I understand you all. It was. I think at one point it was the point system that didn't seem to work. You adjusted it after that, then you adjusted the
you. Yep.
percentage or the square feet. It's just that it's so annoying. I understand developers. Um, this is why even when we talk about, and you talked about this language before we started the podcast about how plans have to be provided to the city substantially. If it's going to be substantially different, it needs to be approved, right? But substantially different as a phrase can be argued back and forth because there's really no legality to that, right? What makes substantially different? And this is why I always feel that city council, planning commission, whatever, needs to take responsibility on things that are of this substantial development to be able to say, you know what, let's put it in front of the city council. Let the city council look at this. Um, because one, developers will look at presenting it a little differently, I think, and two, some of the people that need to need to do things the right way, I guess. But anyway, that's just me and my.
It's a fair thing to say. I will say one thing is when we ported over Gwinnett's codes when we became a city,
Right.
the
Hmm.
language they had then, maybe they still do, I don't know, was that the developer created the elevations, those pretty pictures that the public gets to see
Yes.
about, oh, this is what
Right.
it'll look like.
Right. Yes.
The
Love
language
those.
that we ported over from Gwinnett said that when the actual project was constructed, it needed to be in general conformance with the elevation,
Right.
pictures that were
Oh,
shown.
yeah. Yeah. The Gwinnett
And
County regulations were
right,
not any better. Yeah.
that now when you use the word general, that's a pretty wide. So then you
Hmm.
end up getting into a legal back and forth about, ultimately there's almost invariably some tweaks to what's constructed versus the pictures that could have been shown many times multiple years earlier.
Oh, yeah. What materials being used?
Right. And
Because
just different things. We've changed that to now say substantial conformance, not
mhm.
just general. So now we have a little bit farther we can push them. If they ended up saying, look, we get it, but we can't be in substantial conformance. We have to have a wholesale change to the way it looks. it would have to come back to council if it was
Uh,
beyond that.
and
Um,
that's good. That's good that there's that option, and that should go back to council because substantial, right? But
but
even
that's
in
still a definition, substantial.
yes,
How do you, it's not an exact percent, that there's still room
yes,
for the very
right,
thing you're talking about. It's a fair point.
which is good for both sides, quite frankly,
Yeah.
because the city could say, well, no, no, it looks not in conformance with what we want, and the city can make that judgment, right? So it could go both ways. But all I'm saying is that I know that during when Gwinnett County and Planning Commission were doing things, that on certain developments they would actually condition that plans, landscape plans, not just the elevation plans, but landscape plans, site plans would have to come back to either the planning commission or the city council, and usually the planning commission first, for approval from them. So this way, it sort of pulled it out a little, from the planning department per se, and it put it into the people that have to be, the feet have to be held to the fire for this stuff. And by doing that, and it's legal to do that. And we don't, like I've mentioned before, we don't do a lot of rezonings over a course of time. And so it won't block up a city council meeting to have one come up every month or something like that, or two even. Because it doesn't have to be on everything. But when you're talking 230 odd apartments, that that makes sense to me. But I'll leave it at that. Because there's something I think that city's doing great also, which is the CineBistro, that came up also, right? Um, that's been closed for I don't know how many months now. Some people don't even know it's closed or didn't know it closed, and it closed
So
about
that,
4 months ago or something. It's just like
well,
been a long
December of
time.
2025. I mean, so
25.
it's
That was in
almost,
December. Yeah.
6 months ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I've been a proponent also of the city doing what they're doing now. So I'm glad that you all did this. I know it was a tough road to go down on. Um, so tell us what happened on this.
Yeah. So, you can even go back earlier than even December 2025. Go back
Yeah.
to the plan for the town center itself. Anytime you have a mixed use development of that size, you oftentimes want to, if you can, have what we call, oftentimes an anchor tenant.
Hmm.
And that anchor tenant, and you see it in malls too, the anchor tenants in theory are supposed to have a gravitational pull in and of themselves, such that when you put them somewhere, there's a lot of ancillary, smaller type of uses that can
Sure.
feed off of that anchor tenant. So they got
Right.
the gravitational pull, and then you get a bunch of supplementary stuff that are like, sweet, people
You,
are going to
you,
go to the anchor
yeah,
tenant, but we're
right,
going to gravy train off of
right.
the activity from the anchor tenant.
That's similar to a supermarket and all the little stores around it, right?
It's
So
a
same,
perfect
like that.
example that,
Yeah.
strip mall,
Yeah.
you'll
Hmm.
have a, grocery store, and then you'll have, four or five or more smaller ones. They wouldn't exist in and of themselves. So
Hmm.
they feed off of somebody saying, oh, I'm already at the grocery store and I can also go to the dry cleaners that's right here as well. Or I can go to, you know, whatever else, the shoe store or whatever. So in the planning of this, anchor tenants, you know, were discussed. And of course, the town center was a public-private partnership with Fuquay Development, and Fuquay
Right.
came back with an anchor tenant of being of a boutique movie theater, with
Hmm.
a chef-driven restaurant in it.
That
Unique
was great.
experience.
Yeah.
But when you go back, what now, 7, 8 years?
Yeah.
Well, you're probably talking, actually, you're talking 10 years on the planning and approval of this.
Right.
So 10 years ago, it would have been plausible to think that a boutique, theater like this would be an anchor tenant.
Before COVID, I mean, it
Then
was,
throw COVID in.
yeah, I mean, that killed
And
it, I think.
the entire theater industry has been flipped upside down because now
Yeah.
you have all of these films that are going straight to the Netflix or, Prime
Hmm.
Video or whatever. So the theater business has just struggled. And, Metro Atlanta has seen a lot of theaters close,
Yeah.
not just here. And this, CineBistro ultimately was a casualty of it. So, for those who were like, oh, they should have known, they either
Mhm.
us, the city, or Fuquay should have known that wouldn't work. Well, 10 years ago when, this was planned, I don't know that anybody would have known that, a pandemic was going to happen and, all this.
Yeah.
Be
Mm.
that as it may, December 2025, they close. All right. So now you've got arguably one of the most important lots,
Mm.
locations in the city that's now kind of dark, and we need something to be pulling activity to the town center. And
Right.
still, we still, the anchor tenant theory still holds, having something pull. Well, Fuquay started shopping the property. Like, all right, what else can we do with it? It's not going to be another theater.
Hmm.
The problem with that building is that was a build to suit. That building
Mm.
was designed and constructed specifically for that. So
Yeah.
the interior floor plan is not particularly easy for you to have somebody come in. You basically have to gut the inside of the thing out,
Yeah. There's
start
six
over.
mini theaters. They were 100 seats each. I mean, it's just
Right,
like
with the
I
kitchen
don't.
basically in
Right.
plumbing and everything right in the middle. So
Yeah.
it's just bifurcated up such that you just can't really do anything. So Fuquay's, looking at other options and some of the uses that they socialize with the city. And the reason they socialized it with us is because the options that they came back to us were going to require the city to go through a change of condition or even a rezoning,
Right.
depending on which of the uses they were. And none of the uses were ones that the city was like, oh, you know, hell yeah, let's do it. In fact,
Right.
there were some of them that were just kind of cringy.
Mm.
And, I told city council, I'm like, just be, advised that we may be in a decent position right now on this particular thing because it's going to require approval from you. And so you can kind of, you know, telegraph that you're not going to be inclined to approve it. But there are uses out there that would be called, considered a use by right. And
Mm.
they wouldn't have to come to us at all. And we could not control or prevent some uses in there that really wouldn't be keeping with the vision that city council has for the town center. So
Right.
told council, unfortunately, the only way for, a local government to control a real estate, piece of real estate and a use is for us to own it. Well, as coincidence would have it,
Mm.
I think Fuquay, you know, probably just didn't want to keep going through the pain of shopping it and this and that. And we're probably worried about, trying to get a use that's always going to require city council's approval. So they came and approached the city and said, while we're doing this, oh, by the way, would you guys like to buy it?
Mm.
So I discussed it with council. I was like, here's an opportunity to control it. And, so council was like, yes, this is an opportunity. And speaking
Right.
of the term or the word opportunity, many years ago, city council set up what a segregated fund
Hmm.
called the Opportunity Fund. And this is a fund in which council set up and squirreled away money for the sole purpose of sitting there. And if an opportunity came up for there to be some sort of an action by the city that city council felt was, hey, this is a great opportunity, let's do it, that we would have the cash on hand to do it and not have to end up going into debt or other things. So, council looked at this and said, look, we're not sure if there's a better definition of an opportunity here than for the city to buy it, control it, and, control what it becomes.
Hmm.
So they discussed it and ultimately, Tuesday night authorized the purchase of that property. and for me to, execute closing, provided that all
Right.
the due diligence that you normally have on a piece of property come back good. Now, I will tell you that in preparation for that vote, we do have a letter of intent that we signed with Fuquay. So we had already forecasted our interest in this,
Hmm.
for a purchase price of 3.25 million.
Hmm.
Part of the due diligence is an appraisal, which came back in the high fours. So, what one of the comparables they used was another theater. So I'm not sure if that's a fair, comp given the
Right.
way the industry is, but they had other comps. So it still stands to reason, it's like 2.5 acres with the building and the parking
Yeah.
associated with it.
Hmm.
And if we were prepared to move the dog park a little bit at the town center, we could
Hmm.
end up adding another 2 acres by pushing, into the back of CineBistro all the way to
Right.
Peachtree Corner Circle. So we could theoretically put together a 4 acre site right there. So council is like, look, the only way to do this is, again, the control.
Hmm.
So appraisals come back good, title search has come back good, the environmental site assessment has come back good. There's no like, you know, burial ground there or,
Right. Right.
fuel leak or anything. So there's a few other little things that, we're still waiting on, but I suspect that they'll be all fine. And early July would be a close, the actual
Okay.
closing of it. So if we get to that point and it all, as I suspect will play out, what we're going to do, we've already started doing, is we've engaged some market research analysts that we're going to bring in, and they're going to talk to council about the viability of two paths, two courses of action
Hmm.
once we're the owner. One is looking into trying to find a tenant that would be what you call an adaptive reuse. They would use the existing building.
Hmm.
Maybe they have to gut it, probably will have to gut it, but they're not tearing the building down. They're going to come in and they're going to put a different use inside the building. And council will discuss kind of what types of uses would be the ones that would be in keeping with the town center's vision, would
Yeah.
add
Yeah.
to the town center, so they'll kind of talk through that. The market analyst will tell us what, what's pie in the sky and really improbable or what's feasible or whatever, but we'll have
Hmm.
that kind of course of action being worked. And the other one is to discuss what might be a public-private partnership in which we end up working with a private developer on that, and maybe it's even a scrape, and rebuild of a
On
completely
4 acres.
building,
Hmm.
in which that one is definitely one where there's a lot of possibilities when you
Yeah.
consider, basically a blank slate.
Hmm.
Could even add 2 more acres. So you could almost have a blank slate of 4 acres right next to the town green at the town
Yeah.
center. What
Yeah.
could we
Yeah.
do with it? Could
Yeah.
we go, should we go 3 stories, 4 stories? Should be there be something on a rooftop? Should there be, and you hear this in the community too, should there be a, multi-purpose special event venue as part of this?
Hmm.
Should there be, I
Yeah.
mean, it's wide open. So we'll discuss some of the possibilities there, and then, and that'll be over the next month or two or
Hmm.
so. And then when we have enough information that we can kind of at least set general left and right limits on viable stuff on either of those two paths,
Right.
we'll engage the community and have a big community meeting where we'll kind of present what we've learned so far from the market analysts,
Hmm.
and then kind of ask the community, all right, you've kind of heard what we heard already, which is what can and can't really work here. But
Hmm.
there's going to be a lot of stuff that still are possibilities, and we're going to be like, what do you think? should go there. And there may be some ideas that come from that, we're like, oh, that's a good idea or whatever. And then at that point, now we will have two action plans that
Yeah.
potentially are running concurrent or parallel to each other. One, we've got brokers out there looking to see if there's somebody who would come in and do an adaptive reuse. And then
Right.
we've got some, engineers and architects that are maybe come up with site plans that could be the scrape and rebuild and what possibilities there. And they're just,
Yeah.
we're working the action plan and we'll see which one comes back with the best.
You might even be able
Go
to
from
then,
there.
you might be able to even put out an RFP then, a request
Well, we
for
would. That would
proposal,
be
right?
how on the,
Okay.
especially on the public-private partnership,
Right.
that would be how it would be done is we have kind of what we would like to see,
Right.
maybe even more specifically what we don't want to see.
Yeah, because you could actually, I think at some point we talked not about this one particularly, but about how an RFP can exclude multifamily
Yes,
as one
we
of
could
the
say,
options.
yeah, we could be like, look, we would like to hear from you, the private development community. What you might come back to us as a city is a public-private deal. And we'd like it to, maybe have, we can even put things like we want it to have an entertainment focus. We want it to be a value
Hmm.
add to this or that. And we also don't want to, we will not entertain anything that includes, it could be no multifamily or no more, this or that. I mean, I don't know what it
Yeah.
is, but we could do that. And then we open it
Hmm.
up and we let them come up with creative things that they think
Right.
would work and we
Hmm.
entertain those. That's how that path would work.
Hmm.
It wouldn't be that we're shaking the trees, actively. We would sit back and let them, brainstorm within
The,
those firms and then come to us
right.
with options.
Well, and the great part is that the city owns the property or will own the property, which means that, you know, I would hate myself to see more multifamily there. And we've had this discussion before. It doesn't make sense since Solace is there, since there'll be multifamily across at the Forum because that's what they're planning to do there. And that was part of the original zoning back when, or rezoning when they bought it. So I mean the city really holds its own destiny here, right? By
Is why we want
owning, right,
control.
right.
Absolutely.
And so I personally think that was a great thing for the city to do. You'll eventually get that money back, so it'll
Well,
be
yeah, I
just
was going to
fine.
say, I mean, what we don't know, Rico, is the end result could be again something because we will be owning it while this process plays out.
Yeah,
So again, city council's in the enviable position of being, able to say, nope, nope,
right,
nope.
right, exactly.
That's the
That's right.
great thing to do that.
So
Now, at the end of the day, we
yeah,
could end up coming up with somebody who wants to come in and buy it from us. And so
it's
we're no
fine.
worse for the wear because
Right,
we got
right.
to approve and we could end up being a landlord of somebody who wants to lease from us for a long period of
And
time.
you still, and the city can still control what goes in there either way.
Yep.
Selling it, leasing it to a degree, you can still have that control
Yeah,
over it.
so I don't know
So,
whether we're going to be long-term owners, short-term owners, whether we
right,
landlords, whether we're going to
right,
be in a public-private partnership, whether we break it
right.
up into smaller pieces and but again, control allows us to work out that ownership,
Yeah,
tenant partnership model, however it will be. So it will be an exciting process. And when the city is in the controlling position
hmm,
and the community's had a chance to kind of let city council know how they feel. City
yeah,
council, is, and that's again why this opportunity fund existed is just because it allows us to, jump
yeah.
in and control it and,
Think
you
it's
know,
terrific. I think that
yeah.
was
So
very forward thinking, very, I mean, this is one reason why we were able to, get Simpsonwood Park the way it was, I think, because of money that was available that the city could put towards keeping that a park versus and it ending up being 300 apartments or something, um, or homes or whatever. Um, we've actually, I want to be respectful of your time too. We've come towards the end of our podcast time together. I do want to throw my 2 cents in. I would hope to see a company like Hershand, who's Peachtree Corners based, that owns multitudes of amusement parks and other uh, immersive entities and such. Uh, Someone like that actually thinking of a visionary way of looking at Peachtree Corners and that piece of property because it is an anchor point to one of our to the biggest part of Peachtree Corners, I think, with the town center and all that. But
Well, you all give you credit again. You brought this up in a previous conversation we had about Hershend,
yeah,
and they're headquartered here.
yeah,
And I think it would we would be foolish not to give them some sort of a local preference when we have a company that's headquartered here. And I think it's fair to
sure,
say that we will. It's actually a pretty common practice for a local government to have local preference on bid,
mm,
applications, because, you're like, we're taking care of a company that's already a corporate citizen,
yeah,
a corporate
yeah.
tenant. So we will definitely, be approaching them as part of this process in a way that at least if they have interest, they may be in, more of a driver's seat than other ones if they want to play. I mean, they could come back and be like, yeah, we're just not,
Oh, for sure, yeah,
interested or whatever, but we
yeah.
would be foolish not to
Yeah.
recognize that, let's take care of our corporate, tenants first
Citizens, yeah. Mm,
before we, entertain those who aren't located in Peachtree
right,
Corners. So
right.
that was, when you brought up the first time, I've since talked to the economic development team and they were all like, absolutely. So that was another good
Oh,
idea.
great. Glad to see that's going. Brian, it's always a pleasure. So hang in there with me for a minute, but thank you for being with me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Everyone else, thank you all. If you have questions or you want to leave comments, feel free to leave them here or reach out to Brian. If you have a special idea, if you're a businessman or if you're a group of investors that think they can create a truly good experience here in Peachtree Corners by taking that over or by leasing it or whatever, I mean, you should all be, looking at what is its best use, what could be evolving. And maybe it is a multimedia entertainment center. Maybe it is arts and theater. Maybe it is something else. But there's a lot of creative people out there. So you all should be putting your thinking caps on